Welcome. These are my preseason predictions for the 2023 NHL season for the Western Conference. This is a lot more difficult than the Eastern Conference. A lot of these picks are, it's a little different. Let's get started with the Central Division. I have Colorado finishing in first place. I don't think they got that much worse. They do lose Nazem Kadri, who, they'll miss the point production. They'll miss the two-way presence that Kadri had. JT Compher should slot into that position. That'll be solidified during training camp and preseason. I don't think you're going to miss that much of the production that Kadri provided by replacing him with Compher. We'll see, though. You lose guys like Burakovsky as well. But you also have guys that are ready to step into that role, like Alex Newhook. There's a bunch of young players that are ready to step in and be a part of this team. So I think we see some of those younger guys step up and produce a little more than they have. Goaltending as well. They lose Darcy Kemper. They lose Grubauer the year before. It's just becoming a goalie corral in Colorado, which is fine as long as you have a good defensive structure, which they have. You have a great defensive core. You have great forwards who play excellent two-way games, and when they're not, they're playing keep away in the offensive zone away from the goalie. It takes a lot of the pressure off the goalie. I'm a big fan of Pavel Francouz. I think he'll be great this year. I really like Georgiev. His stats have been questionable, but man, that dude can play. I think it's going to be a good tandem in net. I don't have too much concern for Colorado. I think they're still the clear favorite to win the Central. Next up is St. Louis. Really the same team. It's a great team. They lose Perron, sure. It's a little bit of power play production they lose. They lose Ville Husso. You got a guy like Binnington who's going to need to be that number one guy, who's going to need to play like a number one goalie. That's my biggest question mark for this team. Is Binnington going to play as a number one goalie like he did during the 2019 Stanley Cup run, or is he going to play like he did a couple seasons ago? Last season, he played half the season poorly. He played half the season great. Which Binnington are we going to get? Hopefully it's a consistent one. As long as he's consistent, they shouldn't be in a bad spot. I think they're solidly a number two in this division. Third place, I have Minnesota, which can be a bit of a wild card. You lose the likes of Fiala. Does Jost come in on that wing and replace some of that production? Does Jost do well? Does he flourish on that wing, or does he flop on his face? Does Rossi come in? Does Rossi play with Boldy? Do they have chemistry? They played a little bit together in the AHL. Is that chemistry there? How does that line look? What happens to Freddie Gaudreau? Does he slot down to that fourth line center? A lot of question marks in terms of how that lineup will look. We know that the first line, the Kaprizov, Hartman, Zuccarello line will look the same, and we know that third line or a second line, so I call it a two-way, 2B line, with Eriksson Ek centering Marcus Foligno and Greenway. That should also stay the same. They always play against the other team's top line, shut them down. One of the best defensive lines in all of hockey. That other second line and that fourth line might look a little different. Defense is good. The biggest concern with me, though, with the Wild is their goaltending. What are we going to get from Fleury? Are we going to get a 9-10 save percentage or above for this year? Or are we going to get the 906 Fleury we saw last year? Is he going to take a step back, maybe be like a 901 goalie, 900 goalie? And then how does Gustafsson respond to that? And they traded Gustafsson for Talbot, Gustafsson from Ottawa. He had some brutal-looking stats in Ottawa, but he was playing behind probably, in my opinion, it was by far the worst defense in the entire league. Arizona had a better defense than what Gustafsson was playing in front of. He's shown he can be great. His analytic numbers are good. Will that translate to wins and stats in a Wild uniform? We'll see. There's some question marks with goaltending. This is a team where, they might overachieve in the eyes of some, or they might just miss the playoffs altogether. I'm not too worried about that. I think if the Wild are going to take a drop, this is a year they could. And I don't think it'll necessarily impact their future. They have their key cores locked up for the next few years. They have a lot of young guys, a lot of young prospects who can step right into the lineup. I think they'll be back in the playoffs next year, even if they miss this year. But preseason, where they are on paper right now, I got them at third. Fourth place team, I have Nashville. Nashville, they're a good team. Very like wild card, middle of the pack kind of team. They go out, they get Nino Niederreiter, who can score 16 to 20 goals on a wing. He's a great two-way player, provides defense, can be a physical guy if needed for the team. They go out and they get an elite defenseman in Ryan McDonough from Tampa. They get better, but will we still see the same production we saw from Duchesne, Johansson, Forsberg that we saw last year? Career years, can that be replicated and can they exceed that? I personally have doubts and questions, but they need that, and I hope they replicate the success they had last year because it was fun to watch, and they really need scoring. So we'll see. I have them finishing in the fourth spot of the Central, getting a wild card spot. Fifth place, I have Dallas. It's just a matter of how much will Pavelski produce with respect to last season. He had a great season last year. At what point does age start to play a role? Will they get production from Tyler Seguin and Jamie Benn? Will they? They need to sign Robertson still. Was there going to be turmoil that is carried over into the locker room and on the ice from the owner not wanting to dish out contracts to younger players because they haven't proven themselves yet or whatever? There's some question marks. I don't think Dallas really gets better or worse. Who they lose? I think they lost Klingberg. But I have them in fifth, and I have them just missing the playoffs. Sixth place, I have the Jets. The Jets look good on paper. They added Andrew Kopp. They're the Jets. They always look good on paper, and they always finish sixth place. I have them finishing sixth place. I don't see much change. What impact will the coaching staff have? Paul Maurice will not be there for this upcoming season. Will that have a positive impact on the team? What's going to happen from there? I don't know, but until they show me otherwise, kind of like Buffalo, I have them in sixth place. Chicago in seventh, Arizona in eighth. Chicago and Arizona, it's kind of a toss-up. It depends on when Patrick Kane and kind of Taves get traded. Taves has fell off quite a bit in terms of his production. He's a good defensive forward, but it hasn't produced on the offensive score sheet like he has in prior seasons. Kane's still just a beast, and I think is capable of changing a game. I think they'll get a few more wins with Kane in their lineup until he gets traded. And if that happens before the season starts or right when the season starts, we could see Chicago drop into last place. So I had to wear the Arizona Coyotes jersey because not had many opportunities to wear a Coyotes jersey. It's pretty great. So that's the Central. Going on to the Pacific. Now, any of these top five teams, it's kind of a crapshoot. Any of these four teams, you can make a case for finishing first. And yes, the Canucks have a very good team. We'll get into that. I don't think Vegas is capable of being a first-place team in this division, but I think they're more than capable of being well in the mix, maybe being second place, maybe missing the playoffs. We'll talk about that too. For now, I have the Edmonton Oilers finishing in first place. Let me tell you why. Their defense stays the same. Defense needs improvement, doesn't get improved. It's kind of my knock on them. Their goaltending gets a lot better. Their Jack Campbell in net should provide a lot more consistency in that position. That's it's huge for this team. They really need to fix their defense to help with their goaltending. You can't just fix one and not address the other. It's usually kind of a tandem fix that needs to be done. So they're getting there. There's an improvement at the very least. The offense is fantastic. You got McDavid, you got Draisaitl, first couple centers down the lineup. They play together on the power play, one of the most lethal power plays in the game. And they had Evander Kane, polarizing player, but dude can shoot and dude can play physical and get underneath the other team's skin. He's a 30 goal scorer. I'd expect him to put up 35, 40 goals this season. He's got a great shot. The thing is, with a guy like Kane, it's not if, it's when. When will the next incident occur with him? It's become such a cycle through so many teams and so many seasons with this dude. When does it happen? And when that incident happens, it will probably have an effect on the Oilers in the standings. Not only are you losing a fantastic goal scorer and a physical guy that gets under the skin of the other team, how much locker room turmoil does that bring? How much internal damage does that really do to a team? It's done a lot to the previous teams he's been on. So if Kane is good for this year, if there are no incidents, if there's no locker room issues, if he keeps his mouth shut, I think Edmonton is a first place team. And so getting into second place, LA is grossly underrated, and I don't understand why, because their lineup is just stacked. My biggest concern with them is goaltending. You got John Quick, who is 36 years old now. Didn't have a bad year last year. Do we see a drop-off or do we not? We got Cal Peterson, who kind of did have a bad year last year, but is a very solid and capable goaltender. They kind of had the 1AB scenario going last year. John Quick had more starts because he was a better goalie. What do we get from that? But in terms of the offense, it's pretty stacked and pretty underrated. You got Fiala in the offseason, which is fantastic. You got Kopitar, you got Kempe, you got Deneau, who's one of the best two-way centers in the game. You got Trevor Moore, you got Ardvison, a 30-goal scorer. Iafallo and Kaliev are probably going to be on that third line. Byfield's coming into another year with experience. Byfield looks good. This is a very good offensive group, and the defense isn't bad either by any means. And Doughty will be back for this year. He was hurt for most of last year, so that's a huge addition on their defense. Sure, the contract might be a little much for what he provides, but he's a number one line defenseman, and he's still that dude. Man, he's only 32. I feel like he's been around forever. Next up is Calgary. Again, I don't see Calgary taking much of a step back, in all honesty. Sure, they lose Kachuk, they lose Goudreau, but they get Mackenzie Weegar, who really bolsters up their blue line. They're going to be really good defensively. They were already really good, and the coach is a defensive-minded coach. They have excellent goaltending. They're going to be tough to beat. But you also go out and you get Huberdeau. Huberdeau is one of the more elite passers in the game. He can provide offense. He can give he can create goals. He can create scoring plays just by passing the puck, it's a fantastic skill. So I think they're going to have to win a lot more games than they were winning, 3-2, 2-1. But I don't think they'd really take a step back. I think they're more than capable of winning those games. You got Markstrom and Vladar in that, and Vladar, his stats weren't as good as I thought they would be, but man, he looked good in a lot of those games he played. He's a good young goalie. It's they're going to be tough to beat. It's going to be a tough matchup every time you go to Calgary, kind of like the New York Islanders. Very old school, very very defensive minded, but man, they got some good defensive players over there. Next up, I got Vancouver. You look at the Vancouver roster, you look at what they did under Bruce Boudreau, including the rough times they had under Bruce Boudreau, and yes, they didn't win every game under Bruce Boudreau. They are such a good, young, prolific team with a lot of talent and a lot of skill. I can't see them missing the playoffs again. I can't. I think they're too good. They got JT Miller locked up. Bo Horvat's going into a what's it called? A contract year. Is he gonna produce more? He might not. But sometimes players produce more in a contract year. Does he get traded? What goes on in Vancouver? I don't know. It's such a weird team, and man, that fan base. All the power to you for sticking with that team, because they've had some up years and they've had some down years. I think this will be a good year, and I think they have a strong young core that'll be together for a long time. I have them making the wild card. Number 5, I have Las Vegas just missing. I'm not overly concerned about Robin Lehner being out for probably the whole season. We don't have a timetable on that. Logan Thompson, I think will be fine. I'm really not. I think he'll be all right. Last year they had such an issue finishing the season scoring goals. They lose Pacioretty. They trade away Pacioretty for nothing. They trade away Dadonov. for nothing. Like, those are the guys that were scoring goals for you. Jack Eichel was in the lineup during this scoring issue. I think Jack Eichel will be better. I think it's going to be a very different environment for Bruce Cassidy too. It's, you got Jack Eichel who comes in with a superstar ego. You got some young guys that are going to need to step up, and he didn't really do well with the young guys in Boston as the Boston Bruins coach. It's going to be a very different atmosphere. I think he's going to vibe with some players. I think there's going to be a little bit of sandpaper between other players. I don't know that Vegas makes the playoffs this year. I don't know. We'll see what happens. I think they'll still be a very good team. I think they'll be competitive up until that last minute. I don't know. I have them as the odd man out missing the playoffs. I think Nashville finishes with more points than Vegas. It's what I have. Seattle, I think, gets better with the additions of Bjorkstrand, and they made a few additions. I think of the bottom three teams that really are not going to make the playoffs, I think it's pretty clear cut. Seattle made improvements, whereas San Jose and Anaheim just did not. I don't think Seattle is going to be a last place team this year. I don't think they're that bad, but they're definitely not a playoff caliber team, at least in the Pacific. I think the Pacific's pretty solid this year. Did not say that last year. The Pacific was by far the weakest division the past few years. Hasn't been a question, but this year I think it's pretty strong. You got 5 strong teams that can make a good case for a playoff spot. Seattle's creeping up though. They're creeping in there. You got Matty Beniers and Shane Wright might crack the roster this year. They're improving. They're not getting worse, and that's highly encouraging. It's a long build for the Kraken, and they're getting there. I have San Jose finishing above Anaheim. I know a lot of people have San Jose finishing last. I don't think losing Brett Burns is the end of the world. I think it gives a little more, gives some of the reins to Karlsson, like, hey, you're our guy on defense, like, let's go. And I think Karlsson responds well to that. I don't think they got worse. They still have, like, Tomas Hertl and Timo Meier and a lot of those key pieces. They weren't awful last year. They weren't a playoff team by any means. They weren't in the playoff race, but they weren't terrible. I don't think they're going to bottom out this year. I don't think they're going to be good. They're definitely going to be a bottom-feeding team, but I don't think they're going to be as bad as Chicago and Arizona. Last place, I have Anaheim. I don't think Anaheim got any better. I don't think they made any improvements. Sure, they'll have McTavish come in. Maybe he plays with Zegras or Troy Terry. They lose Getzlaf. I don't see a lot of progress in Anaheim. I see a lot of key pieces coming in and them selling off veteran pieces that they brought in years ago. They're kind of just sustaining and not improving. Like, why are you trading a guy like Hampus Lindholm when you could just be better next year? You got all these young guys who are ready to come in and have an immediate impact, and you're trading away your key guys to be competitive in the Pacific Division. I don't see them they did not get better than last year. They just didn't. I have them finishing below San Jose. They had a brutal second half of the season. I don't know if that's going to happen. A lot of the rookies in Anaheim hit a wall a few months in. I don't know if that necessarily happens again. We'll see, but I got Anaheim in last, man. I don't see much improvement from that team, especially if they trade away John Gibson. That dude's a fantastic goaltender. Sure, he had a bit of a down year, but also look at the defense playing in front of him. It's really not that good. So there's that. So it's my predictions. Let me know what you guys think. What do you have for the Pacific Division? Because, does anyone have Vegas, winning the division by any chance? I clearly have them missing the playoffs. To finish off, Nashville and Vancouver I have as my playoff teams. Dallas, Winnipeg, and Las Vegas I all have playing it pretty close, keeping it competitive till the end. I think Dallas can make a run. I think Winnipeg is too good to not be in the playoff race. I think they'll be a little better than last year, but we'll see. Vegas, I think, is just going to miss the playoffs, to be honest. The Central Division, there's going to be a lot of beating up on Colorado and Arizona. So I don't know. I think Nashville will kind of take advantage of that, get a few extra, a couple extra points, and that'll really help them put them over the edge to get into the playoffs over a team like Vegas. Obviously, this could change. This is, it's just, you just can't predict this kind of stuff when teams are this close. We could see Vancouver and Vegas make the playoffs and Nashville just completely miss it. Or, maybe Winnipeg figures out how to win a game. They have a team that should be more than capable of winning a game, but we haven't seen that progression. Maybe Winnipeg makes that jump this year and knocks out Nashville. We'll see. I think this is, the Central I'm pretty confident in. I'm pretty confident in the Pacific too. I think these top 3 teams, maybe top 4 teams, you can kind of swap around. I'm not sure if Vancouver gets to number 1, but I think they have potential. They have such a good team though. So if they can channel all their talent, I think you can make a strong case for Vancouver being the best team. Might be too soon. We might need this whole season to play out for people to get more confidence in that. But let me know what you guys think. Let me know who you have going where, what your impact players are going to be. Do you have San Jose finishing below Anaheim? That is the Pacific might just be a hot mess this year. Just draw a line here and reassemble. All right, that's all I got. Thanks for watching, guys. I appreciate you. Take care.